Dan Bongino, conservative pundit, radio show host, one of the biggest shows in the country, probably the world, is threatening to quit his show over a vaccine mandate at radio network Westwood One. Now, Dan has basically said you can have the vaccine mandate or you can have me, but you can't have both. He goes on to explain that there are a lot of working class people sitting there with a hard decision about either medical issues or religious issues or otherwise, and they're telling their kids, I'm going to have to lose my job. Now, the story from the Washington Post actually says that he's calling for relaxations of the vaccine mandate. That doesn't seem to be what he said. He said you can have one or the other. But if that's true, he's basically saying allow some exemptions. I don't agree with that sentiment. I'm not saying that's actually Dan Bongino's position, but I am 100% in this regard anti-mandate, be it tests or exemptions, because we're going to start getting into really dangerous territory. I put out a tweet earlier, and I was just like, now that we've normalized like vaccine mandates, can I mandate my employees give me all of their medical histories and then I can publicly disclose it to the rest of the staff? I mean, I'm not going to come out and be like, I'd like to make an announcement. Jane Doe has lupus, right? Obviously, if certain employees wanted to express certain issue and they can publicly express that. But what I mean is, could I now just be like, everybody who has lupus has to do this particular thing? And then when some people get fired, they'll be like, I guess the person has lupus, right? I think that's horrifying. And I think it is discriminatory for a lot, to mandate that people now publicly disclose things that may be personal, private. But they're interesting questions. I mean, a lot of people say, don't I have a right to know if someone has an infectious disease? And I'm like, maybe people who are sick shouldn't come into work. That's why we have sick days. Now, we here at timcast.com, check out the website, be a member. I am adamant to everybody, do not come into work sick. Because I get mad about that. If you are sick, enjoy yourself a nice bowl of hot chicken soup. Watch some daytime TV. Okay, put on daytime TV, a little archaic. Put on your Family Guy reruns or whatever it is you want to watch. I've been watching House lately. And then relax or work from home or do whatever. But don't bring your sickness around other people. I don't want to get sick. You got sick time for a reason. We're really good with it. We have unlimited sick time here at Timcast. If you're sick, you just don't come in and you do what you can elsewhere. And if you can't work because you're sick, I don't know. I'm kind of lefty in that regard, right? I'm not going to cry about it. We'll figure it out. We want people to be healthy. But anyway, I digress. I don't like the idea that someone could call in sick and I'd be like, everybody heads up, so-and-so's got the flu and they got the Hershey squirts or whatever. I just think it's inappropriate. There are some really interesting ethical questions around vaccine mandates. And I think the real issue boils down to the perceived severity of the illness. Because I was talking to Ian in Timcast IRL, and he mentioned people oppose vaccine mandates. What if it was Ebola? And I'm like, I think if it's Ebola, like airborne Ebola, you're going to have people just outright self-regulating. No one's going to want to spread that. They're going to be freaked out. And then he was like, oh, so if you think it's more severe than someone else, then your rights be damned. And I was like, it's a good point. It is. Should there be vaccine mandates for other things? I think it really just comes down to, unfortunately, this one is overbearing through executive action, widespread, and there needs to be, I suppose, the perspective I have is that while COVID is very serious, it doesn't rise to the level of seriousness for me to think we should mandate all of these things. I think people should make those personal choices. And to be fair, even if there was an airborne Ebola, I think a lot of these restrictions would be over the top. Granted, we probably wouldn't protest against the city quarantining an area, but you got to ask yourself then, at what point can they just say something is severe or convince people and then use that to gain power? So there are very difficult moral and ethical questions here. I want to point something out, though. Let me read a little bit here and just show you the first context, and then I want to talk about something. They say, in late May, the massively influential radio network Westwood One debuted a new daily talk show from Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent and New York City cop who gained stature in conservative media during the presidency of Trump. The show occupies the noon to 3 p.m. time slot, once dominated by Rush Limbaugh, setting Bongino up as one of the key challengers for his audience. Within 2 months, the show had reached distribution on more than 300 stations, which the company described as impressive growth. Now Bongino is threatening to walk away completely. He has taken issue with the vaccination mandate imposed in August by Westwood One's owner, Cumulus Media. Chief Executive Mary Berner gave all employees until September 27th to be fully vaccinated against the coronavirus before an expected return to the office, and wrote that it would neither be fair nor do we have the bandwidth to make exceptions based on individual preferences, according to industry publication Inside Radio. Several Cumulus radio hosts have already quit or been terminated because of a stated preference not to be vaccinated for personal or medical reasons. Let me just stop right there. Medical reasons? You mean your doctor's like, I'm sorry, you're ineligible. And they go, you're fired. Yet these people are psychotic. Bongino is threatening to join them. Though the host's team says that he has been vaccinated on the advice of doctors because he has Hodgkin's lymphoma, Bongino is objecting to a mandate on behalf of rank and file employees who don't want to get vaccinated. Quote, I'm not really happy with the company I work with right here, Bongino told listeners on Monday. I believe these vaccine mandates are unethical, and I believe they're immoral. I believe they don't take into account the science of natural immunity due to a prior infection. I believe they're broad-based and don't take into account an individual circumstances of why they may or may not want to take a vaccine, and they're antithetical to everything I believe in. So we'll go back to the airborne Ebola thing and just say, yeah, vaccine mandates are still probably a bad idea. It's tough, right? Especially when you have a very serious crisis. The government and the Democrats, the establishment, the Democrats, view COVID as the apocalypse. But it's not. It's just pretty bad. And so I think we all tolerated a certain degree of imposition on our lives. But I think many people have reached the limit of that risk. And now people are like, I'm willing to accept the risks because I've seen the data. That's why I think here it's very different. But I do want to point something out. Let me read a little bit more, actually, and then I'll point something out. He says, so I'll say it again, I'm not going to let this go. Cumulus is going to have to make a decision with me if they want to continue this partnership or they don't. But I'm talking to you on their airwaves. They don't have to let that happen. And I wouldn't mind if they didn't, because it's really unfortunate that people with a lower profile than me who don't have 300 plus stations have been summarily either shown the door or been put in really untenable circumstances because they simply want to make a medical decision by themselves. If Cumulus does not relax the vaccination mandate, quote, this is going to be an entirely untenable situation going forward, said Bongino, who promised to revisit the subject every day until it's addressed. If he leaves the network, Bongino would be the most prominent conservative media personality to quit a job over a vaccination mandate. Cumulus has not replied to emails from the Washington Post seeking comment. All right. Well, they go on to mention that Fox News doesn't actually have a vaccine mandate. So that's a correction on my part because many people were reporting it and I fell for the fake news. They say Bongino's show is simulcast on Fox News streaming service Fox Nation. And they say he hosts Unfiltered. Although Fox News' parent company, Fox Corp, has not introduced a vaccine mandate, a human resources memo sent last month said a small group of employees who are not vaccinated or chose not to share their vaccination status are required to be tested on a daily basis. More than 90% of rank and file Fox employees have reported they are fully vaccinated, according to the memo. Fox News personalities who oppose vaccine mandates have inveighed against them on the air have largely refrained from calling out the company's vaccination policies, and Bongino didn't critique Fox as he chewed out Cumulus during his radio show on Monday. Last week, Fox News host Tucker Carlson was asked about Fox's policies in a podcast from the Daily Caller. The conservative, we get it. Quote, I'm not qualified to speak for the company on this because I don't run the company. I'm just an employee of the company. My personal preference is that Fox News would make a statement about what their policies are. But I think, like a lot of companies, they're hesitant to do that because, why would you even want to get involved in that conversation? Well, I'd like to know if Fox News has a vaccine mandate. And now I'll say a few things. Westwood One tried to sign me a couple of years ago. They were talking about how, the Ben Shapiro show, how many views it's getting and how big it is and all that stuff. And they're like, we're going to get you and we're going to do all these things. And I was like, sounds awesome. And let me just tell you something, my friends. A lot of people say, it's hypocritical for me to be on YouTube because YouTube censors people. And I said that people who give in to the vaccine mandates aren't opposing it. Well, let me clarify once again. If there is a boulder and you're standing, holding it, stopping it from rolling, you're actively opposing it. If you then say, I no longer wish to be in the way of this boulder because it's difficult, and you step out of the way and the boulder rolls past you, you're no longer actively opposing it. Now, you can say, I oppose the rolling of the boulder down this hill. I get it. In principle, in idea, you do not like these things, but I'm saying you're not actively opposing it. Now, people said it's hypocritical to be on YouTube because they censor, except we have Steve Bannon on the show. We have Alex Jones on the show. We had Enrique Tarrio on the show, and we run our speakeasy. We are actively speaking out every day against censorship and challenging YouTube and utilizing it to the best of our abilities. So yeah, I would consider us to be actually standing in front of that boulder. Now, the boulder may be pushing us backwards. We may be losing ground, if that's your view, but I'm not going to give up this massive platform simply because people have been censored, especially when I can bring those people on the show. That being said, I am under no vaccine mandate in any capacity. If Google came to me and said, prove your vaccination status or we terminate your channel, I assure you my channel would be terminated. I would not comply. There's a difference between being like, we've been censored on some issues, some things we can't talk about, but we have other platforms where we can then use this to move people over. It's not a perfect situation. But what Dan Bongino is doing right here is literally opposing the vaccine mandate. You guys get it? He's not giving in. He's calling it out. He's using his abilities to oppose it. Now, they're still doing it. I don't expect Dan Bongino to right now just be like, I'm walking away. He's actively challenging it. He may be pushed back by the boulder, but I respect that. When people are looking at their jobs and just say outright, I'm going to comply, that's very different. If Dan Bongino came out and said, I oppose it, but I understand why they're doing it, I'd be like, he's not really opposing it in principle, in heart. No. This is someone standing up. I have tremendous respect for Dan Bongino. Now, I thought about this and I'm like, I'm not in this situation because when Westwood One tried to sign me, I was very obstinate and objected to their ridiculous contract. They sent me a contract. It was an insult to me. And I said, why is this garbage contract being sent to me? And they were like, it's standard practices. And I said, you expect me. They were like, you got to hire a lawyer to fix it. You send me garbage and then expect me to pay to fix that garbage. I don't care. I don't need you. So let me explain. All right. When one of the biggest radio networks comes to me, and this is years ago, and said, look at Ben Shapiro. He's the #1 podcast. We're gonna make your show huge. And then I said, no, I don't care who you are. I don't care how big you think you are. I don't care if you hold the golden ticket. I don't care. If you cross my line, if you are trying to push me past the line, principally, morally, or ethically, I'll outright say no. When the Antifa guy in Boston got in my face, started swinging at me, I stood there and I just tightened my abs and clenched my teeth. And I said, make your move, buddy. Tucker Carlson had me on his show because I refused to move. You're going to hit me. You're going to hit me. I'm not walking away. These people want to come at me and say, concede these things. And I said, no, never going to happen. I'll do it on my own. And you know what? Thanks to all of you who are members at timcast.com. Thanks to all of you who watch. You prove it. You don't have to give in and abide by these authoritarian, ridiculous, pieces of garbage. Now, if I was signed to Westwood One, maybe I would have been on 300 stations. Maybe the Tim Pool Daily Show would have ended up being a top 10 podcast. When I was doing this show 7 days a week, I was reaching I think my peak position on iTunes top charts all time, all podcasts was number 34. And we started taking weekends off to diversify the business, to focus on the vlog, and I needed time to do other things. And now Timcast IRL actually is a much bigger podcast. It consistently bounces around 180 to 230 or whatever. Sometimes it drops off. Sometimes it pops back up, whatever. I don't care about being the biggest podcast in the world. I don't care about being on 300 radio stations. I just care about saying what I believe. My opinions change as I meet new people and discuss new things. I care about people having their rights protected and individual freedoms. I care about working class people being listened to, and I'm not going to concede that. And so I ask myself, why aren't I in a situation where I'm similar to Dan Bongino? It's because I don't sign these deals. It's because I don't enter contract with these companies. It's why timcast.com has no major billionaire backers. It's why I am the chief principal officer, the sole owner. And it's all possible thanks to memberships and people who sign up and watch the show and buy our merch and are involved. It's a business. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. And if at any point I get some guy in a suit knocking on my door saying, do this or else, I'll say, bro, I will never comply because I don't care. Interestingly, in full disclosure, I had a meeting yesterday with some business meeting. I'll just put it. I don't want to put anybody on blast or anything. It was a good meeting. And the conversation was syndicated radio. We could put your show on the radio. How about that? And I'm like, yeah, sounds good. Whatever. I will tell you this. If it goes to any radio network, I will absolutely refuse. I will have it in any contract. My show will not be carried by any station with a vaccine mandate. I don't care. It's not happening. Now, to be fair, Google does have a vaccine mandate. There's a difference, I suppose, in me posting something on a social media platform. It's my company, and we have a certain distribution channel. You could theoretically argue it's a similar thing, and I probably should walk away from YouTube as well. I suppose there really are limits. I view YouTube as an opportunity to leverage your ability to see this, to send you to timcast.com. My company has no vaccine mandates. People aren't required to disclose their medical histories. We just trust them to do the right thing and try and be healthy, and we try to help them where we can. With that being said, it may be fair to say use the reach of these companies, because no employee at these companies is going to be producing this show. Maybe that's a fair point. Maybe it's a little too much for me to be like, I'm going to pull my show off these airwaves. And maybe something similar could be said of Dan Bongino. If his show is not being produced by these companies, and it's just a syndication deal, then I actually think that may be somewhat of a good thing, because then, they're not going to be hiring people and forcing them to undergo the vaccine mandate. I'll put it this way. If Dan Bongino's show is produced by people who are not under vaccine mandate, and that then goes to a radio network for broadcast, and that means that radio network doesn't hire people and force them to undergo a vaccine mandate, in the long run, this may work out. So the same thing is true for our company publishing through YouTube. And it may actually be smarter to say, no, let's go on these radio stations. If my company grows more and hires more people, let's say we hire 100 people and we say no vaccine mandate. That means if those shows are airing on the radio stations won't be producing shows and hiring the 100 people to put them under vaccine mandate. It's a mathematical formula. The more people we hire and the more we take from the airwaves of these companies, the less there would be vaccine mandates. I'm not going to pretend to be the arbiter of morality. I think there's absolutely hard decisions, contradictions. Nothing is black and white. It's a gradient. And so you could say, Tim, Google's got a vaccine mandate. Why don't you pull off Google? And I'm like, fair point. I don't know. I feel like we would lose a tremendous opportunity not being on YouTube, and I'll stand my ground here to bring people to timcast.com, where we can build something every single day. And we're getting millions of views now at timcast.com. Maybe the real strategy is not in complete retreat. Maybe the real strategy for someone like Dan Bongino is to tell people, stop listening on these radio stations and start listening on Fox Nation or on his personal website, and let the radio stations decide if they want that to be the case. Because I'll say it now, I cut my content in half. I used to do 6 segments every day on YouTube. I do 3 now, and we're focusing on doing more for timcast.com. Why? It's impossible to just say, okay, there's a conflict, remove yourself from the battlefield. But it's not the same as someone coming to me and saying, undergo a medical procedure. So for the time being, I'm like, can we leverage this to move people, to other platforms, to a website? Far from perfect. Absolutely far from perfect. I'm far from perfect, and you're free to disagree with me. We're all trying to figure out the best way to handle these circumstances. I wonder if the smartest thing Dan Bongino could do is just be like, if you're listening on the radio, stop, get your phone out, pull it up on the website, listen to the show there. Don't give viewership to the people who would do this. Because I'll say that right now. I mean, people can watch this show on Rumble. You can watch it wherever it exists. There, we post it on multiple platforms. You can watch this on timcast.com. We use YouTube infrastructure. I get it. Whatever. It's hard. I guess it's hard to be absolutist in this. Like, anybody with a vaccine mandate, we are severing business relationship. Man, I don't know. I have tremendous respect for Dan Bongino for standing up and speaking up, though. And to a great deal, I agree with him. I wonder if there's something else we can do in terms of leveraging these systems to pull people out of them. But there still is a big difference from being like, I oppose this, but I'm going to actually enter that system and undergo a vaccine mandate myself. I won't. I would tear this company to the ground. Everyone would be fired before I would submit to any of that. If Joe Biden personally came here and said, look, you're going to do it or else, I'd be like, get out of my face. It's never going to happen. I will not allow that to befall my employees and my company. So maybe that's the important place to draw the line, and we should utilize the system to try and get more people to work at companies like this and less people to work at companies like Westwood One. I have a question, though. And I don't know for sure, but Westwood One does list Ben Shapiro, the Ben Shapiro Show, as part of their network. Now, it used to say on iTunes, the Ben Shapiro Show was Westwood One. Now it says the Daily Wire. So I don't know if he's still with Westwood One, but they still say he is on their website. I wonder what Ben's opinion is on Westwood One, because I think there's actually a fair point to say if a radio network wants to carry a show that is openly defying the vaccine mandates, that protects more employees. It grows a company in the right direction. Maybe I was wrong to say I would refuse to be on those radio networks, you know, because Dan Bongino's threatening to quit, and I respect that. And I'm like, Then I think about it, you know, just right here and now, like maybe we actually want to dominate their airwaves. We want to reduce the amount of employees that exist at these companies and hire them here. Dan, hire these people, have them work for you, and then syndicate the show on these networks, because then you're saving people from this, you know, system. If you think that there's working class people who are stuck under this, I think that there's actually an interesting approach. A lot of people are like, you know, like I said, Tim, you're hypocritical because people have no choice but to get the vaccine. I'm like, okay, then maybe we should be on YouTube. Maybe we should be on these networks. And then I can try and hire many of those people, and they wouldn't be under that system. We should empower systems that don't subjugate people in this way. Man, I'll tell you this. I don't have the answers. I don't. The things I say about my opinions are just, I'm basically telling you how I'm feeling and how I'm going to respond to these things. But maybe I'm wrong about a lot of it. I don't know. I just think at this point, what they're doing is absolutely wrong. There's reasons for exemptions. There's reasons natural immunity should be taken into account. And all in all, I think the mandates are just a path towards a social credit system. That's the main reason why I think it should not be allowed. It is a crisis being exploited. People are being put in positions of fear to force them to give up their rights. And I'm not a fan. But I don't know. Maybe the best way to fight is to engage and challenge. Maybe it's not so easy to just walk away from the entire thing and say, I give up. When it comes to private employment, I'll put it this way. If I worked for a hospital and they said, do it or else, I'd quit. Because engaging in that system and giving into it ultimately results in the system functioning. With the show I'm doing here and with Dan Bongino, the show he's doing actually weakens the mandate system. It challenges it. So perhaps the best thing is not for Dan to leave or for me to refuse any kind of syndication, but to actively have our voices dominate these platforms so that popular culture shifts and these systems give up. I don't know. Let me know what you think. It's tough, isn't it? I can't pretend to have all the answers. You know, you need to go to a priest, a rabbi, or an imam for those types of things, or a monk, perhaps. But I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.